Hello, everyone. As you likely know, this is MOJO Rising, and you have with you today Julie Stevens and Oscar Sierra. And we're really excited to share with you a fact that really helped me and helped my cancer journey quite a bit, which is how you begin to prepare your body for treatment. And when Oscar blew my mind the very first time we met, and he mentioned this is something that you can do because it's not something that any doctor or article or even cancer patient had ever mentioned to me. So it was a little odd. And I kind of questioned, what do you mean you can prepare your body? So without further ado, Oscar, share a little bit more about what some of the things that you could potentially do to prepare your body for whatever types of cancer treatments that could be coming.
Yeah, so the title of our podcast is How to Make Cancer Suck Less, right? And no doctor or anyone that's been through cancer is going to say, "Oh yeah, the radiation and the surgery and the chemotherapy, that was a piece of cake. That actually, I felt better after each session. I could jump higher and run faster and I had more energy." No, everyone's pretty honest about the fact that it kind of sucks or really sucks. But as the title of the podcast tells us, it can suck less or maybe not suck at all. But you got to get your ducks in a row. You got to get your cards right, prior to going into that battle, right? So let's take, so I mentioned the conventional interventions there, which is typically, surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. And, there's time in another podcast perhaps to discuss all the other things that one can do, maybe not instead of, but maybe in addition to one or two of those things. But that's not the point here. The point is, how do you get your body and your mind ready for what is going to be a difficult, at best, process with one of these conventional treatments? So patients come to me in all phases of their cancer journey. They just got diagnosed and they haven't yet started one of these therapies, or they are in the middle of doing one of these things, or they have already done them and they are suffering from the short, medium, or long-term consequences from these things. And it's just so much easier to prevent these problems than it is to treat them. So I love it when people come to me prior to doing one of these things, because it's so much easier to prevent than it is to treat. So it takes a good 2 to 4 weeks to really kind of get your ducks in a row to where your body and your mind are going to be in a much better place before going into one of these things. And typically, not always, but almost always, cancer is not a medical emergency. So most of the time, a tumor, if in fact there's hematological cancers that could be a medical emergency within weeks. But most of the time, the tumor's been there for years. So, waiting 2 to 6 weeks prior to jumping on one of these things is really not a big deal at all. Of course, they put the fear of God into people. By they, I mean conventional medicine. Doctors say, "Oh, we need to do this right away because it might metastasize and, tumors might pop out your eyeballs or your brain." And, whereas that's maybe theoretically possible, the fact that it hasn't done that to date, even though it's been there for years, tells us that probably if it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. And, you have some time to take a deep breath first and foremost and really consider your strategy, which should be, as you said, get your body prepared for maybe one of these conventional treatments if you're going to do them, which sometimes, often it's a good idea to do a surgery, or sometimes it's a good idea to do chemotherapy. But always it's a great idea to get your body prepared for one of these things. I give the analogy of going into battle, right? So we don't send new recruits from the Army or the Marines off to Afghanistan, Iraq, or wherever else before going through basic training first. So, we want to teach patients Kung Fu and put some helmets on them and gloves and armor and shin pads prior to going into a situation where we know that they're probably going to take some hits. So it takes a few weeks to do this. And I can talk about some of the things that it takes. But first, it's just a basic concept that it's going to be rough. So, put on a helmet. And there are a bunch of things that you can do to kind of protect yourself from the side effects. And go into it instead of, if you're going to kind of rank like a video game, like your vital power, your strength. If it's a zero, at a zero, you're dead, and 10, you're, Superman. Most people are not at 10. I mean, even though they don't have cancer, we're not hanging out at 10 all the time. At best, I'd say, we're probably 8 is a really good day. So most of us are hanging out at like, 6 or 7 a lot of the time. We're feeling okay. We're getting through all our tasks, but we're not like waking up feeling like, oh man, I feel super rested and like energized and I'm ready to clean the garage or knock a, home run out of the park at work today. So there's ways to get there.
Oscar, what are some of the things that, and let's just take chemotherapy because I think that's just an easier one for a lot of us to visualize. What are some of the things that chemotherapy does to your blood that you would prepare? Like, what are some of those blood tests that you would look at that it naturally goes lower that you would bring someone higher before they began the intervention?
Yeah, so pretty much all chemotherapy, it's by definition toxic. I mean, so it's not good for you.
Yeah.
I mean, just watch the way the nurses handle this stuff, at arm's length and with gloves and, with good reason. I mean, no one's pretending that this stuff is good for you. The supposition is that it's going to be worse for the cancer than it is for you, but everyone knows that you're going to take some hits and there's going to be some collateral damage, and there's going to be collateral damage to your white blood cells and your red blood cells, hematocrit, hemoglobin, sometimes platelets. And that's from a biochemical standpoint. I mean, you're just going to also feel tired, crappy, achy. Depending on the chemotherapy, it often affects fast-growing cells, which are often endothelial cells, which are your linings of everywhere. So you're from your mouth to your colon to your, your skin. So sometimes your skin and internal and external skin, so epithelial tissue on the inside and outside, is going to be a little roughed up. The good news is that skin can grow back quickly. Imagine if you get a scratch from your cat or whatever, and your hand is a little scratched up because the kitty scratched it up, but like, a week later, it's fine. Like, it doesn't take months on like a bone or a tendon to really heal. So the good news is that the damage is fairly temporary most of the time, especially to epithelial tissue, but you can protect the skin. So you can get the white blood cells to a good place. So a lot of people were already low in hemoglobin and hematocrit and white blood cells and platelets before going into chemo. So, they start, instead of starting off at an 8 out of the vitality score, they started off at a 4 or 5. So it's not like they're going to go up with chemo, they're going to go down. So I would rather get someone up to an 8 or a 9 before,
And what are some of the ways that you would do that? Like, how would you go from a 6 to an 8?
Well, you find out where the kinks in the armor already are. So if someone's hemoglobin, hematocrit, red blood cells are already low because they've been bleeding, so like in a colorectal cancer, a lot of times there's bleeding, people don't even know it. Yeah. So you can give them herbs to nourish the blood. So capital B blood in Chinese medicine blood. You can also give them an iron supplement, but the iron supplements typically are really hard on the gut. There are some food grown iron that they fed it to yeast or bacteria. The yeast and the bacteria ate the iron, saturated the yeast and iron, kind of like the foie gras of vitamins. So you're not just eating a chunk of iron and metal because your stomach is like, whoa, dude, like, I don't know what that's all about. It's a chunk of metal. I mean, I don't really know what to do with that. It's like a rusty spoon in there. Instead, they take that iron, feed it to a bacteria or yeast, put that, dry it out, concentrate in a capsule. The stomach sees the yeast and it's like, oh, I eat that all the time. Nutritional yeast. I can absorb that. And it goes through the epithelial lining into your body and gets absorbed, like through kind of like the Trojan horse, like the horse goes through the castle walls and opens up its payload, and inside the horse is the delivery, the horse is the delivery mechanism for the iron. So your iron levels go, I mean, I can get iron levels up in 5 days, but the conventional CVS or even prescription iron is really rough on the gut and it makes people constipated. So that's iron. What about magnesium? Because a lot of the platinum-based magnesium, almost all magnesium, lowers magnesium. Well, it turns out that people were already low to begin with. So just look at how much magnesium broccoli has today compared to 50 years ago. So assuming people are eating broccoli and green things with magnesium, which they're not, especially if they just came out of surgery or something, because they're probably not eating much anyway, because appetite's low, they're sucking wind trying to recover.
And if it's colorectal, you're not eating any cruciferous vegetables anyway, because you can't. So
yeah, so they're already often coming from a compromised situation. They're not hanging out at a 7 or 8. They're probably at a 5 or 6, and sometimes even 4. So you can get these numbers. So astragalus, for example, is a bean legume, Fabaceae family herb, that the root of which is very safe, and it will get your white blood cells, and to some extent red blood cells, hematocrit and hemoglobin, up. And it doesn't take a month to do this. It'll do this in 10 days. So you can brew this stuff up. It doesn't taste good. It doesn't taste bad. It doesn't really taste like much at all. So there are herbs that help get the platelets, like red root, Ceanothus americanus, astragalus, magnesium, and iron supplements that are formulated in a very digestible, gentle way. There is, these are basics, and if you know that the gut is going to take a hit, then you can put soothing demulcent agents in the gut, like aloe, okra, slippery elm, marshmallow, that have no contraindications whatsoever, and are just really moist. It's exactly like putting lotion on your skin, or sunblock, or some kind of, thing to not have it dry before you go out into the sun, because the sun is radiation. And if your skin is dry and doesn't have water and good oils, that radiation is going to burn your skin. And the same thing happens with radiation from a therapeutic radiation intervention standpoint at the hospital, or from chemo. It's still oxidative to some tissues and destructive to some tissues, which you can expect, but you can mitigate that damage by, if you know exactly where the damage is going to be, say, because adriamycin is doxorubicin, often given in breast cancers. They call it the red devil, right? It's pretty harsh stuff, and it can be very effective for cancer cells, so it kills the cancer cells. Unfortunately, it's quite toxic, especially the heart. So you assess the heart, you get someone sleeping really well, and you do things to protect the heart before, during, and after the doxorubicin. But you don't want to start doing these things, after doxorubicin. You want to get your heart function up to a 8 or 9 before it takes the hit. So when it takes the hit, it goes down to a 6 or 7, rather than starting at a 6 or 7 and going down to a 3 or 4, or heaven forbid, you started a 4, but you're already kind of on the line, not doing great even before chemo. And then you did the chemo. And unfortunately, a lot of people, do very, very poorly on chemo, and whether the chemo is ever going to affect the cancer in a cytotoxic way is a totally different question. But let's just assume that they're choosing the right chemo, and that the surgery is a great idea and the radiation is a okay idea. You still can get your body prepared for that battle, because it ain't going to be fun, but you can put the helmets on, again, specific to each drug and therapy, if you just kind of think about it logically. And really, this is something that all oncologists, radiation oncologists, surgical oncologists, really, if they want to have better outcomes and their hospital wants to have better looking numbers compared to the other hospital, this is a no-brainer. This is the same. Like, I used to work at a fertility clinic, and a couple of the reproductive endocrinologists, because patients always ask about, well, what are your success rates, right? Of course, there's a lot of factors. You can't compare a 46-year-old woman that wants to have a 10th child to a 25-year-old that, her husband has a low sperm count, and, that's the problem. It's not, you can't compare those two. But, when you kind of account for those factors and you compare 25-year-olds to 25-year-olds and 46-year-olds to 46-year-olds, you can get some pretty good statistics. So a couple of the reproductive endocrinologists figured out that their numbers looked better, which means better sales. So they get more patients in their door because they got better numbers to boast on how many women go to term and have, babies. So they figured out that when they do the herbs, they get better outcomes. still most of the time with IVF, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's no secret. Like and reproductive fertility rates is maybe another topic, but because they're tanking. And it's good for reproductive endocrinologists because it's keeping them in business, but they do better business when they can boast that compared to the other fertility center in that same city, they get better success rates. Well, how do they do it? They add the herbs in before, during, and after the IVF, and it increases success rates. So we can do exactly the same thing in the oncology setting.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say you said one thing earlier about how iron rips up your stomach. And I, of course, found that, and I had lots of issues with it. And one of the things I did was I paired iron and vitamin C together. And as soon as I did that, I didn't have any other issues. So I think there's also magic, not only in what you're taking, but in the combination of things you're taking to make it your body absorb things differently. So,
absolutely. Every nutrient has other nutrients that it pairs well with, like there's no vitamin C tree. Nature doesn't just have a vitamin C tree. It has, fruits and, cilantro, for example, and parsley, ridiculously high. People think oranges, but gram for gram, cilantro and parsley rather has way more vitamin C. But parsley isn't just vitamin C; it's the bioflavonoids in there, right? It's got some apigenin in there, and these bioflavonoids and other compounds is kind of like the whole entourage package that nature puts together that helps you absorb that vitamin C and assimilate it well into your tissue so that your connective tissue can connect. So yeah, nature, when you do it in a more natural way, like combining different nutrients and minerals, and like for example, choline citrate helps carry minerals into the cell. There's ionophores like zinc uses quinine to help deliver it into the cell. So you can take exactly the same amount of X vitamin or supplement and you get, 50% out of that. You pay for 100%, but you actually receive 50% of what you just paid for. But if you combine that with a little mocktail with some Q-tonic and tonic water, you get closer to 95% of what you just paid for. So economically, it makes sense. Outcome-wise, it makes sense. I mean, it's just like a win-win altogether. You just need to know, what the pairings are, like the chefs, the right wine with the right steak and the right white wine with the right fish. And there's certain pairings that just work.
Okay. Now, talk to me. You've mentioned the word in past conversations with me a few times, foundational protocol, and how you would start to get people up and ready. And I know that's something that we're going to do some thought leadership on our website as well. But what are some of the things that you would say are foundational? Some things that people may have in their drug closet, and other things that really are things that they wouldn't be aware of. But like, what would be some of those foundational protocol items that you would say likely could be part of their starter kit?
Yeah. So if we're not talking about diet, there's a lot to be said for what a foundational diet should look like. And there's a lot to be said for lifestyle. And I think you're asking is, what are some of like the supplements that would be foundational for 99.9% of any cancer scenario, from a leukemia to a sarcoma to a breast cancer, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So vitamin D, that's a basic one for even if you don't have cancer, unless you're a surf instructor in Hawaii and, soaking up sun all day long. You probably are inside under a roof and next to a computer, and you're not getting any vitamin D from that computer or that screen. Or your cell phone. So you need some vitamin D, and it pairs well with vitamin A and vitamin K. There's more to be said for that, but that's a short one. Turmeric and other broad spectrum immune modulating redox agents. So reduction oxidation. So not all of these are antioxidants. Some of them are simultaneously oxidative to cancer cells, while somehow magically knowing which ones are the host patient cells, like the Julie cells. How do they do it? Lord knows how they do it. PFN, as Robin McGee says, pure fairy magic. We don't exactly know yet. But so I don't want to say antioxidants, because the plants don't really work in an anti way. Anti is drugs. Drugs always do one thing. They block certain pathways. They're anti stuff. But plants, sometimes in the same person, at exactly the same mouthful, they are pro over here and anti over there. They kind of modulate. So I'm saying redox modulator, reduction in oxidation modulators, like turmeric and black cumin seed. This is in Botanical Treasures, which is a nice Donnie Yance mix of things that happen to be, broadly speaking, anti-cancer. And I put that in quotes because, again, plants aren't really anti-anything. But to use simple language, they're anti-cancer, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory mix, and it's a thing called Botanical Treasures. A good fish oil, because that is also quote unquote antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, again in quotes. So Complete Omega Essentials, because it's got the clean fish oil and it has a couple of other plant-based oils like the omega-7s and the GLA omega-6, which kind of help regulate hormones. And the omega-7s help go to your skin and epithelial tissue, which we talked about. A lot of the radiation and chemotherapy really negatively affect epithelial tissue because they tend to be fast-growing cells. So this is kind of soothing for the epithelial tissue and protects you from the sun, by the way. So we talked about the Botanical Treasures, DAK, Complete Omega Essentials, zinc, because most people are low anyway, and a lot of the chemotherapies will lower your already low zinc. Magnesium, because it's another mineral that people are already low in because it ain't in the soil. So how can you expect it to be in your asparagus, assuming you're eating asparagus and parsley and, cruciferous vegetables anyway? Well, not much is in there. So you need more. And chemo is going to lower that. So especially platinum-based chemotherapy tends to lower magnesium levels. So you want to go into it with a high magnesium, so that when you take the hit of the intervention in like chemo, it goes down to a less, from a 9 to a 6 rather than from a 6 to a 4, where you're really feeling it and it's going to affect your energy level.
Okay.
Another one would be a nice greens powder, unless you're just a vegetarian and eating, fresh, local, organic greens all day long. So a greens powder can easily be put into a smoothie, or honestly lemonade. It tastes fine in there too, and it's easy. A protein powder, I recommend the whey protein, because it's fairly inexpensive, very bioavailable, and if someone is cool with dairy, and by the way, dairy has lactose, which most people are not cool with, especially me, but the good quality undenatured whey that has never been heated, because when you heat a protein, you denature it, you change the shape of it. So it used to be like this, and now it's shaped like this because of the heat, and it doesn't work so well in your body. So undenatured whey, the greens powder, D, zinc, magnesium, a great botanical kind of cover many bases with one formula. Botanical Treasures, the fish oil. What am I missing? Am I missing something? I think that's
the basics.
That kind of covers a lot of bases. Lately, I've also been kind of sneaking in mushrooms in there, especially if someone is not eating a lot of mushrooms in their diet, because they're great prebiotics and they have this immune modulating effect. And some of them have a clear anti-cancer benefit to them. I mean, they're used as a prescription drug in Japan for breast cancer. I mean, this is not a new thing, right? So that's pretty easy to do.
I was to say, you suggested that, and I've been even trying to sneak mushrooms everywhere I could. I even put them in my eggs now, because why not? You might as well have them.
Yeah, why not? So even your basic, people have heard about reishi and cordyceps and turkey tail being anti-cancer, but you know what? Your basic white button agaricus portobello mushroom or shiitake mushroom also have some pretty good research behind them, with being a prebiotic and microbiome kind of talking positive thing, and some anti-cancer research. So I sometimes will sneak in some capsules of a good mix of mushrooms, like Mushroom Synergy, that has some fruiting body and the mycelium. For people that don't know what that is, a fruiting body is kind of like the part that you see above the ground, the mushroom, cap, if you will, or shelf that you see growing on a tree or coming out from a stump on a log. The mycelium is the thing that is actually inside the log, which sometimes is actually more than the fruiting body, because it extends for miles and miles and you just don't see it. We like both. And not many companies use both. Sometimes they just use the mycelium, and sometimes that mycelium is mostly rice. And but all of it's good. Even if there's rice in there, something is better than nothing.
Okay. So I just want to wrap up this one and just say a couple words or a couple things that I heard you say. One, it's critical to increase your vitality score about 2 to 4 weeks before you begin treatment. There's a multitude of different ways you can do it, but some of the specifics you mentioned are things like zinc, vitamin D, turmeric, fish oil, magnesium, greens powder, whey proteins, and mushrooms. You can also do things like iron or astragalus and some comparisons depending on really how your body reacts to some of these herbs. But that's going to help prepare your blood levels so that you can withstand conventional treatment and weather the storm and have much fewer side effects as you go through that. And some of those 5 side effects could be things like exhaustion, nausea, things like that, because your body's actually already built. Is that correct?
That's it. That's it. And yeah, I mean, getting someone sleeping really well is critical because that's when the body repairs itself. So, identifying the kinks in the armor before you go into that, putting armor on everything, but putting extra armor and duct tape on the parts that were already needing reinforcement before the chemo, radiation, or surgery. So, is sleep an issue? Is pooping an issue? Do you pee well? You may pee frequently, but you may not be peeing well. Breath work, all that stuff. So it takes, ideally someone works with someone to take a good third party unbiased look at where the kinks in their armor are. But yeah, those things that I mentioned are generally a good idea for generally everyone. The iron, may be a more specific thing for people with low iron because you don't want to be adding iron. Just a lot of postmenopausal women that I run blood work on actually already have too much iron. So they're rusting out because it's too oxidative. So I don't want to blanket say iron for everyone, whereas I could more blanket say 99% or more people could use the vitamin D and K, and most of these people also could use the turmeric and mushrooms and the fish oil.
And I think, so as we go to wrap, thank you for dropping all these knowledge bombs on us, Oscar. I think for me, what I would say is I had the experience of going through a couple chemo sessions, and besides being tired, which I think everyone is, and a little bit of hair loss, I didn't really have side effects. I literally was able to go to a music festival in Mexico as I was doing cancer treatment because of these protocols and because of how Oscar had prepared my body to withstand the conventional treatments. So I encourage you to think early and not after, so that you can prepare your body. And I think of it as like measure twice, cut once. Make sure you're doing the upfront preparation work so that you're ready for these interventions. And then you can ride the wave much, much easier. So thank you for dropping these knowledge bombs on us, Oscar. We're so grateful for you. And we hope that you will turn in and subscribe and start to like some of our other videos. The next one we're just about to record is all about some of our toolboxes and the different toolboxes that you can use across your lifestyle. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope you learned something about some of the foundational protocols that you can start to use in order to increase your success rates and your joy during your cancer battle. And frankly, make it suck less. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Bye.